The deal was simple: 1 week, 3 rules, and 0 feelings. But when he pulled me into that alleyway and kissed me until my knees gave out, I realized the only person pretending was me. I need a wife, Elara, only for a week, and only on paper. Julian Blackwood looked at me with the same cold, calculating intensity that had made him the most feared CEO in the city. He wasn't asking, he was negotiating. We were sitting in his high-rise office, the city lights shimmering below us like a sea of distant dreams. I was his most trusted assistant, the woman who kept his life running like clockwork, and apparently the woman he wanted to use as a shield against his meddling family. "Your grandfather's inheritance clause," I whispered, the words feeling like lead in my mouth. "Exactly," he said, leaning back in his leather chair. "If I'm not married by my 32nd birthday, which is next Saturday, my cousin gets the firm. I need someone I can trust to play the part. Someone who knows my schedule, my habits, and won't get attached." "And you chose me," I said, my heart hammering against my ribs. Julian didn't know that I had spent the last 3 years in love with him. He didn't know that every late-night coffee run and every schedule adjustment was fueled by a devotion that went far beyond my salary. "You're the only logical choice, Elara. You're professional, discreet, and you already know the family dynamics. We'll have a private ceremony, a week at the family estate in the Hamptons to show face, and then a quiet annulment. I'll pay you enough to retire comfortably." "I don't want your money, Julian," I said, standing up. I wanted his heart, but that wasn't on the table. "But I'll do it, on one condition." He arched a dark eyebrow. "Name it." "Rule number 1, no feelings. Rule number 2, no physical contact unless we're in front of your family. And rule number 3, when the week is over, we go back to being boss and employee. Nothing changes." Julian stood up, walking toward me until the scent of his expensive cologne, charcoal and vanilla, filled my senses. He held out his hand to seal the deal. "Agreed, nothing changes." As I shook his hand, a spark of electricity shot up my arm, making my breath hitch. He didn't let go immediately. His thumb grazed my knuckles, and for a split second the CEO mask slipped, revealing a hunger that terrified me. The Blackwood estate was a fortress of glass and stone, overlooking a crashing Atlantic Ocean. As we stepped out of the black sedan, Julian's hand immediately found the small of my back. It was firm, possessive, and entirely for show. His sister, Beatrice, was already watching us from the balcony. "Remember," Julian whispered in my ear, his breath hot against my skin. "We're supposed to be in the honeymoon phase. Look like you actually like me." "I'm an assistant, Julian, not an actress," I hissed back, though my body was leaning into him involuntarily. Dinner was a trial by fire. The entire Blackwood clan was there, eyes sharp as vultures, waiting for us to slip up. Julian played the part of the doting husband with terrifying ease. He laughed at my jokes, fed me small bites of steak, and looked at me with an intensity that felt real. "So, Elara," Beatrice said, swirling her wine. "We were all so shocked. Julian has always been so distant. What was the moment you knew he was the one?" I felt the table go silent. Julian's hand tightened slightly on mine under the table. I looked at him, searching for an answer, and for a moment, I forgot we were lying. I thought about the night he stayed up with me when I had the flu, or the way he always remembered how I liked my tea. "It wasn't a moment," I said softly, my voice trembling. "It was the way he looked at me when he thought I wasn't watching, like I was the only thing in the room that mattered." The table erupted in small, satisfied murmurs. Julian didn't look away. His eyes were dark, searching mine as if he were trying to find the lie in my words. That night, when we retreated to the master suite, the tension was thick enough to choke on. There was only one bed, a massive 4-poster that looked like a trap. "I'll take the sofa," Julian said, his voice unusually raspy. "No," I said, turning my back to him to unzip my dress. "The staff talks, we sleep in the same bed, we just stay on our own sides." I heard him exhale sharply. I struggled with the zipper, my fingers fumbling. Suddenly, I felt his hands on my skin. He was unzipping the dress, his fingers trailing slowly down my spine. I shivered, my eyes fluttering shut. "You're shaking, Elara," he whispered. "It's just the cold," I lied. He didn't pull away. He turned me around, his hands resting on my waist. The room was silent except for the sound of the ocean and our synchronized breathing. "We're just pretending," I reminded him, my voice a mere breath. "I know," he said, his face inching closer to mine. "But the rules didn't say anything about this." The third day brought a violent coastal storm. Thunder shook the glass walls of the estate, and the power flickered and died, plunging the house into a heavy, velvet darkness. I was in the library, trying to focus on a book by candlelight, when the door swung open. Julian was drenched. He had been out checking the generators, his white shirt now translucent and clinging to his muscular frame. He looked raw, untamed, and completely unlike the man who sat in the boardroom. "The power's out for the night," he said, wiping rain from his forehead. He walked toward the fireplace, his movements feline and heavy. "You're freezing," I said, getting up to find a blanket. As I passed him, he caught my wrist. The contact was like a lightning strike. "Why did you say those things at dinner, Elara? About how I look at you?" I tried to pull away, but he was a wall of heat and muscle. "I told you I was acting. Isn't that what you paid for?" "It didn't feel like acting," he growled, pulling me flush against his wet chest. The scent of rain and his skin was overwhelming. It felt like a confession. "Julian, stop. Rule number 1. "To hell with the rules," he muttered. He leaned down, and before I could protest, his lips crashed against mine. This wasn't a fake kiss for the family. It wasn't polite or cautious. It was a desperate, hungry reclamation. It tasted like years of suppressed longing and secret glances. My mind screamed at me to stop, to protect my heart, but my hands were already tangled in his damp hair, pulling him closer. He kissed me until the world blurred, until the only thing that existed was the heat of his mouth and the sound of the rain against the glass. When he finally pulled back, his forehead rested against mine, both of us gasping for air. "That wasn't for Beatrice," I whispered, my heart breaking. "No," he rasped, his eyes burning into mine. "That was for me." He walked away into the darkness, leaving me shivering by the candlelight. He hadn't said he loved me. He hadn't said the pretending was over. He had just shattered my rules, and I knew that when the week ended, there would be nothing left of me to save. The following morning, Julian was back to being the Ice King. He spoke to me in short, professional sentences, never mentioning the kiss in the library. It hurt more than his silence ever had. He was treating our passion like a lapse in judgment, a corporate error to be filed away and forgotten. But things changed at the charity polo match that afternoon. An old flame of mine, Mark, was there. He was a photographer for a local magazine, and he had always been vocal about his feelings for me. When he saw me on Julian's arm, his eyes widened. "Elara married to Julian Blackwood?" Mark asked, stepping into our path. "I thought you were smarter than that." "Mark, it's good to see you," I said, feeling Julian's grip on my waist tighten until it was almost painful. "You look beautiful," Mark said, reaching out to touch my arm. "I always wondered what happened to the girl who wanted to travel the world. Now you're just another Blackwood accessory." Before I could answer, Julian stepped in front of me, his presence looming and dangerous. "She's my wife, Mark, and I suggest you keep your hands off what belongs to me." "Julian, stop," I whispered, but he ignored me. "We're leaving," Julian announced, his voice like a whip. He dragged me toward the car, his silence suffocating. Once we were inside the shielded interior of the SUV, he turned on me. "You liked him touching you? You liked him looking at you like that?" "He's a friend, Julian, and you were the one who said we were just pretending. Why do you care who looks at me?" "Because you're mine," he roared, slamming his hand against the seat. "Even if it's for a week, even if it's a lie, you are mine. And the thought of anyone else touching you makes me want to burn this whole city to the ground." "Is it because of the firm, Julian? Or is it because you actually feel something?" He looked at me, his eyes full of a dark, tortured conflict. "I don't know what I feel, Elara. All I know is that I can't breathe when you're not in the room." The final event of the week was the Blackwood Anniversary Gala. It was a black tie affair designed to celebrate the family's legacy and, secretly, to confirm Julian's marriage so he could sign the final inheritance papers. I wore a gown of liquid gold that felt like armor. As we danced under the crystal chandeliers, the world felt like it was closing in. The lawyers were waiting in the study with the papers. By midnight, Julian would be the official owner of Blackwood Industries, and our marriage would be functionally over. "You look breathtaking tonight," Julian whispered as we spun across the floor. "Don't," I said, my eyes stinging. "The week is almost up, Julian. Let's just finish the job." "Is that all this is to you? A job?" "You're the one who wrote the contract," I snapped, my voice cracking. "You're the one who said nothing changes." "Well, everything changed for me, Julian. I can't go back to being your assistant. I can't go back to pretending I don't love you while you look for a real wife." The music seemed to fade away as he stopped dancing. He looked at me as if he were seeing me for the very first time. "You love me." "I've loved you for 3 years, you brilliant, blind idiot," I whispered, the tears finally falling. "But I'm done. Take the firm, sign the papers. I'm leaving tonight." I turned and ran from the ballroom, ignoring the gasps of the guests. I ran toward the beach, the sand catching in my heels, the cold, salt air hitting my face. I heard footsteps behind me, heavy and fast. "Elara, stop." Julian caught me by the edge of the water, pulling me into his arms. "I'm not signing them," he panted. "What?" "The papers, the inheritance. I told the lawyers to leave. I don't want the firm if it means I have to lose you. I spent my whole life building a kingdom, but I realized tonight that a kingdom is just a cold, empty house without the person you love." The air between us was electric, charged with the honesty we had both been running from for years. Julian led me back to the darkened estate, but we didn't go to the ballroom. We went to the master suite. The fake week was over, but the real story was just beginning. There were no cameras here, no Beatrice, no lawyers. Just 2 people who had finally stopped lying to themselves. "Are you sure about this, Julian? Your family will lose everything." "I have enough of my own money to start over 10 times, he said, his hands cupping my face. "But I only have one Elara, and I've been a fool to let a piece of paper define who I am." He kissed me then, and it was different from the library. It wasn't a desperate grab, it was a slow, reverent exploration. He unzipped the gold dress, and as it pooled at my feet, I felt a sense of freedom I had never known. That night, we made love with a passion that was years in the making. Every touch was a question, and every breath was an answer. It wasn't just physical, it was the joining of 2 souls who had finally found their way home. In the quiet aftermath, as we lay tangled in the silk sheets with the sound of the ocean as our soundtrack, Julian held me as if I were the most precious thing in the world. "I'm not letting you go, Elara," he whispered into my hair. "No more contracts, no more rules." "So, what happens tomorrow?" I asked. "Tomorrow," he said, a small, genuine smile playing on his lips, "we start dating for real, and maybe, in a year or 2, we'll have a wedding that isn't a lie." The morning brought the storm we both expected. Julian's grandfather was furious. The news that the inheritance had been forfeited hit the family like a bomb. By noon, Beatrice was at the door, her face a mask of rage. "You threw it all away," she screamed at Julian in the foyer. "For her, a secretary, you've ruined the Blackwood name." Julian stood his ground, his arm wrapped firmly around my shoulders. "I didn't throw it away, Beatrice. I traded a burden for a life. If you want the firm so badly, go talk to the lawyers. I'm out." We packed our bags in silence, but it wasn't a heavy silence. It was the quiet of a new beginning. As we drove away from the estate, I looked back at the glass fortress one last time. "You okay?" Julian asked, taking my hand and interlacing our fingers. "I've never been better," I said. "But Julian, what are you going to do for a job?" He chuckled, a sound that was finally free of stress. "I think I'll start a new firm, one that doesn't have an inheritance clause, but I'm going to need a very talented partner. Are you interested?" "I don't know," I teased. "What are the rules?" "Only one rule," he said, pulling the car over to the side of the road and leaning in to kiss me. We never, ever pretend again. 6 months later, the world looked very different. Julian's new firm was already taking the city by storm, but the Ice King was nowhere to be found. The man I lived with was warm, attentive, and laughed more than I ever thought possible. We were living in a small, sun-drenched loft downtown. It wasn't a mansion, but it was ours. I was no longer his assistant. I was the chief operating officer and his equal in every way. "Do you ever miss it?" I asked one evening as we sat on the balcony, watching the sunset. "The estate, the power." "I have more power now than I ever did," he said, pulling me into his lap. "Because I chose this life. I wasn't given it by a dead man's will, and I have the woman who chose me when I had nothing to offer but a fake ring." "It wasn't nothing, Julian. It was the start of us." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, velvet box. My heart skipped a beat. "I know we're already technically married on a piece of paper that we need to annul," he said, his voice trembling slightly. "But I want to do it right. No family pressure, no business deals, just me and you." Julian got down on one knee on that small balcony, the city noise humming below us. He opened the box to reveal a simple, stunning emerald ring, my birthstone. "Elara Vance, you saved me from becoming a man I hated. You showed me that love isn't a transaction and that the best things in life can't be bought or inherited. Will you marry me? For real this time?" The tears were back, but they were happy ones. "Yes, Julian, 1,000 times yes." We spent the night celebrating our real engagement, talking about the future, about the kids we wanted, and the travels we had planned. The fake week felt like a lifetime ago, a strange dream that had led us to this perfect reality. But as we were drifting off to sleep, a frantic knocking came at the door. It was Beatrice. She looked disheveled, her eyes wide with fear. "Julian, you have to help me," she sobbed. "The firm, the cousin, he's liquidating everything. He's going to leave the family with nothing. Please, you're the only one who knows how to stop him." Julian looked at me and then back at his sister. The past was calling, but he didn't look back with longing. He looked with pity. Julian didn't go back to Blackwood Industries. He didn't take back the crown. Instead, he spent the next month acting as a consultant to help his sister and the rest of the family save their personal assets, ensuring they wouldn't be destitute. He did it not out of obligation to the firm, but out of compassion for the people who had never understood what he found in me. On the day of our wedding, a small affair on a cliffside overlooking the ocean, Beatrice showed up. She didn't have a snide remark or a hidden agenda. She walked up to me and handed me a small, faded photograph. It was Julian as a little boy, sitting under an oak tree, looking at the camera with that same intense, searching gaze. "He's always been looking for something," she whispered. "I'm glad he finally found it." As I walked down the aisle toward the man who had risked everything for me, I realized that the pretending had been the best thing that ever happened to us. It had forced us to confront the truths we were too scared to voice. Julian took my hands, his eyes bright with tears. "I, Julian, take you, Elara, not as a partner in a deal, but as the love of my life. And I, Elara, take you, to have and to hold from this day forward in truth and in love." As we kissed under the vast, open sky, the applause of our few true friends echoed in the air. We weren't just pretending anymore. We were living, we were loving, and we were finally perfectly free.